Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today, I love the topic of today's conversation. And we're going to be speaking with Ernie Martin today. But just a quick thing before I introduce you. Ernie, I wish that we could have had this conversation about 7 years ago. But
Really?
today, we're talking about marketing for solopreneurs. And it is an important topic because how small, mid, and large size businesses market is completely different than from what a solopreneur can do. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited for today's conversation. Now, Ernie Martin is a seasoned marketing and communications professional. He's the author of Nobody Cares About Your Business, the universal 8 marketing principles every entrepreneur must know to make their customers love their business. He has an impressive career spanning over 30 years, and Ernie has earned a reputation for excellence in his field. Welcome to the show, Ernie.
Yes, Kim, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to talk to you. Like I could talk about this stuff all day long. People have to shut me up. Okay, so because I love this topic. So thank you very much for inviting me to be on your show.
Oh, you're so very welcome. Ernie, this is your first time on the Author to Authority podcast. So I would love for you to share just for, maybe 5 minutes or so, 7 minutes on sort of your business story. Like how did you even get into marketing and where are you at now and who are you loving to serve?
Yeah, excellent question. So I think it goes back to wanting to be an architect since I was 7, and so my parents took us to New York City, and I fell in love with the buildings, and I've always been creative. So I said I want to be an architect. So from 7 to 18 years old, I just knew in my heart I was going to be an architect, and I would have my own architecture firm. But for some reason, and that's another conversation, I changed my major before I got to college to psychology, and I majored in psychology for 2 years and hated every millisecond of it. And I thought after 2 years, what do I want to do? Do I want to go back and start from scratch at architecture school, or do I want to do something else? And I had to think about what I really loved and what I really enjoyed. I loved advertising. I loved marketing. I loved communications, and I just had a knack for it because some of my friends who were running for SGA president would ask me, "Hey, can you run my campaign?" Because I just had this knack for it. And I thought maybe that's what I should go into. And so once I made the change to marketing, it just everything took off. I was like a sponge. I just absorbed everything. I did as many internships as I can. At one point, I was going to school full time, had 2 internships at the same time while still going to school. And it was great.
Glutton for punishment, right?
I was, but I loved. I'm a what you would call I can be a very meticulous scheduler in terms of there are days when I get up at 4 and I get so much done in the first several hours of the day, and so
Yes.
I can fit a lot into a single day and do it again the next day and the next day and the next day. I just have to meticulously plan it, and I learned to do that when I was in school. So that started my career in marketing. I'm a Xavier University of Louisiana graduate, and so they did a great job. Even for it's known for pharmacy, but in business, they're great for bringing companies in to recruit. And so I had a job before I even graduated in New Jersey, working for a bank holding company in the advertising department. Eventually moved into the communications department, learned desktop publishing, handled everything from the company's first internal newsletter, press releases, annual and quarterly reports, writing and designing. And so I moved from New Jersey to Atlanta in 92. And that sort of tells you a little bit of how old I am. So, and one
I
of the
feel like
reasons,
you and I are close to the same age.
okay, well, probably. So I moved to Atlanta because a couple of reasons. One, the Olympics were coming. And number two, I understood Atlanta to be very welcoming to transplants. And I eventually wanted to start my own business, whatever that was going to be.
Mm.
And so I worked for a number of companies, worked for Georgia Pacific, worked for Delta Airlines. And then I started my first business in 2003. So from 2003 to 2008, ran my own marketing communications company. And it's basically an agency. And I was a solopreneur. That was my first foray into being a solopreneur, where I had to do everything myself. When you have a
Yep.
job, you don't have to worry about the accounting. You just do your job and that's it. You don't have to worry about the trash being taken out, um, company insurance. You don't have to worry about taxes on the company or anything like that. You just do your job and then you go home. Well,
And
as
get a
an
paycheck.
exactly, exactly. And the interesting thing about that, Kim, is regardless of whether you work hard or whether you slack off a little bit one week, you still get the same paycheck for the most part for most
Mhm.
jobs. It's not the case with most solopreneurs, because
Yes.
the revenue that you generate is directly tied to your effort that you put into it. Now, obviously, there are things
Yeah.
sometimes people get breaks and people get quote unquote lucky, but I've always seen luck as preparation meeting opportunity. Okay.
Opportunity. One of my favorite quotes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I did the solopreneur thing. I did hire contractors to help with a number of things. So I started off doing website development myself, and then eventually I hired contractors to do it for me for my clients. And so at the beginning of the recession, I left that and was given an offer I couldn't refuse for my next employer, where I was global director of marketing for suppliers for this one company headquartered in London. So I got a chance to travel all around the world. It was great. It was wonderful. And then had an epiphany based on some work that I was doing at the company. And I thought this would make a great business, but I didn't want to start another business. And eventually, after a year of cultivating the idea and creating a business plan, I thought there is no way I can't start this business. So I left that company in 2014, started my current company, Receivable Savvy, in 2015. And so I've been doing that ever since. That started out as, starting out as a solopreneur, and I was the only one. I was doing everything. But since then, I've got some help. So, but it's really a challenge being a solopreneur, because you have to do everything. You have to do everything well. So that's therein lies the
Yeah.
challenge.
It was funny. Like, I'm still in many senses a solopreneur, even though, I run a full scale publishing company because most of my team are contractors and it works really well.
Yeah.
But you are right. Like, I wear many, many, many hats. I'm the salesperson.
Yes.
I'm the accountant.
Hmm.
Thankfully, I don't manage all the book projects. I did find someone who would manage all the book projects for me.
Good.
But this podcast, I work on this podcast. I don't do all the work on the podcast, but I work on this podcast, right? And
Right.
and the marketing and all these things that you want to do, and yet there's only so many hours in a day. And you still have
Absolutely.
to have time to sleep and spend time with
Absolutely.
family, because what's the use of doing this business
Hmm.
for time and money freedom if you never see your family?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a challenge, and that time becomes a premium. And
Mhm.
but it's something that, and you've faced this, because you just said you did, and I've certainly faced this, and others have faced this too, where because you have to do so many things and you have to wear so many hats, there are certain things you don't have. Well, there are certain things you have to try to make time for, and that's family. If you're married, your spouse, etc., friends, a little bit of downtime if you can afford to do that, which I think is very important. The one thing that we can't afford, though, and this is speaking from experience, and I'm typically a very positive, upbeat person anyway, but and in my book, I write, one of the chapters is, should you even be an entrepreneur? Because there are a
Yeah.
lot of people who want to start their own business, be a solopreneur, do their own thing. And the question is, should you even want to do that? Because entrepreneurs, and especially solopreneurs, are made of, they exhibit certain characteristics. And one of those
Yes.
characteristics is lack of fear. Okay. You may be afraid of things may be fearful, but you are able to navigate through that and keep going. So one of the things we can't afford to do is we can't afford to get down in the doldrums, because if we do, then things wouldn't get done. And then, if we're feeling sorry for ourselves, why didn't this happen the way I thought it would happen? And then the next thing you know, you don't have a business. The next thing you know,
Exactly.
you're looking for another job. and you're starting where you're back to where you started from. So I think it's synonymous, solopreneurs and the characteristics of an entrepreneur. You've got to manage fear properly. And
Mhm.
some people can do that very well. Some people can manage fear, have a lot of things going on where it may appear fearful and still get a good night's sleep. Other people come apart when fearful things happen and they can't sleep, and then everything falls apart. The other thing is having courage. You've got to have
Yes.
courage. You've got to be willing to, hey, there's the old saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And so you have something here, but you see that there's something over there that is even more enticing. And if you build a strategy that allows you to go from point A to point B, that means you may have to let go of a couple of things, and that's fearful to some people.
Yeah.
And so having that courage is a necessity when you're a solopreneur and an entrepreneur. Also, having some creativity is
Mhm.
incredibly important. The entrepreneurs that I've spoken with, there are some who are just very creative. Some of them have started businesses, enterprises, grown them significantly. Others get stuck in their fear or lack of creativity. And if someone has another idea, hey, what about this idea? What about that idea? They're fearful and they lack creativity, so they end up not doing anything. Okay. And so that tends to hamstring a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs as well. So, and then you've got to be able to, I think, and I think I'm good at this. Some people are good at it, some people are not. I think I've always been good at balancing the left brain, right brain. So there's the
Mhm.
logical, planning, meticulous side of me that gets to be somewhat obsessive. And then there's the creativity part of me, because as you can see with the guitars in the background, I also write music and I play guitar. So there's a creative side to me. And I'm very grateful for that ability to balance both. Oh,
I got a
good for
keyboard
you.
in my office.
Good for you.
A
Good for
piano
you.
keyboard in
Excellent.
my office.
Excellent. Excellent. No, that's great. That's great. So
I'm
you
actually
you
going to
have an
stop you
idea of what
there
I'm
for a
talking
sec,
about.
Ernie, because I wanted to just make a couple of comments here, because there was a
Yeah.
few things that you said that I think are just little nuggets that if people grab onto them, you know, one of the things you talked about was getting up early in the morning. Now, I realize that not everyone is a morning person.
Right.
So you might have to do the reverse. Maybe you're the one who stays up half of the night and does stuff.
Sure. Sure.
But I am an early morning person. And if I get up at 5 o'clock and I start working, I can get more done between 5 and 9 than I can usually get done between 9 and 12.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think
That's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
it's understanding your body's rhythms, right? And what works best. Because if you're a night hawk and you're trying to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, that is not going to be your productive time of the day.
Right. Right. And different things work for different people. I ended up realizing that I'm a morning person by accident. The first job I had out of college, the reason why I started getting up early and I realized, hey, there's something to this, is I was trying to get to the company gym and use the best bike they had in the company gym. And I was getting there at 6, and another person started getting there at 5:50. So I said, I'm going to get there at 5:40. And so we kept going back and forth. And so I said, I'm just going to nip this in the bud. I'm going to get up at 4. And I'm going to go in there. I know she's not going to be there. And that was the case. She was not there. So by the time I was done, then she was coming in. And I realized, boy, I would get up at 4, go to the gym, work out, be in the office by 6:30 in the same building. And I got so much done. And I realized there's something to this. And so I didn't start off planning to do that. It just happened by
Happen.
accident. But I realized, like you said, if I get up at 4 and I have this is my home office, I have an external office. And if I go to that office at 4:30, 5 o'clock, by the time 11 o'clock rolls around, I've done 6 straight hours of just plowing through stuff. And I'm significantly um, better equipped and
Mhm.
organized and productive if I do that than if I stayed in this office and started working from 8 until 5 or 6. Much more
Yeah.
productive if I get up early. So
Yeah.
we have that in common.
The other thing that you said that I think people need to understand is the word courage.
Hmm.
See, I think people tend to think that courage is this thing where you're not afraid. But courage is the exact opposite. Courage is you feel the fear, but you make a choice. You
Yeah.
choose to
Yeah.
do it anyway. And I
Yes.
think that is critical as an entrepreneur, because yeah, there's going to be stuff flying at you. There's new things you've got to learn. You've got to incorporate new ideas. You have to be open to new ideas. You have to be willing to fail. You have to
Absolutely.
be willing to fail your way forward sometimes. Now, it's not always that way, but there are times when you fail your way forward. And courage is that ability to look at it, know that you could possibly fail,
Yes.
and you do it anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right. It's courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being able to properly deal with fear and put it in
Mhm.
its proper place. Fear is a natural occurrence, and it's healthy. Actually,
Yeah.
if no one had any fear, that's actually a dangerous life to lead. If you have no fear whatsoever, that means you
Yeah.
might fall off a cliff because you have no fear. But fear is a helpful, natural, God-given mechanism in all humans. It's just you have to determine whether or not you're going to succumb to the fear, or you're going to work through whatever issue you're dealing with in spite of
Yeah.
the fear. And that's a learned, for most people, that's a learned thing. That's a
Yes.
learned capability. And I had to learn that. And you
Me
have to learn
too.
it by being in it. Exactly. You have to actually go through it. There's no
Yeah.
seminar you can go to learn it. You have to
You can't
experience.
conquer fear unless you conquer fear. Like
Yes,
there people can tell you what to do, but you have to take that step. Like there's nothing that anybody can train you. You just ultimately have to make the choice you're going to do it. Feel
exactly.
the fear and do it anyway. So I just want to bring
Exactly.
up one more point, and then I want to let you loose because we're losing time here, and I want to let you
Sure.
loose to do your training session. The other thing you talked about was the importance of time, downtime, and with your family and that. And I
Mhm.
learned that one the hard way. September of 2020, and if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard the story. I ended up in emergency 3 times over between September 2020 and April 2021
Wow.
in AFib. My
Yeah.
heart was going like 160, 170 beats per minute. The top
Mhm.
was beating differently than the bottom.
Right.
That was scary. And they started to do, like, they did all the tests and everything. They figured out I had high blood pressure, and they looked at me and he said, they're like, Kim, there's nothing wrong with your heart. So the only thing we can figure out is it's stress. So talk
Right.
about a wake up call from God. I
Right.
said, okay, that means that I need to now structure my life differently. I
Yeah.
started taking lunch breaks
Yep.
almost pretty well every day. There's occasional day, but almost every day I stop for an hour. I
Yep.
don't do any work. I'll have my lunch, I'll read, maybe watch a TV show. Uh, I like to craft, I'll maybe craft, but I stop for an hour
Yes.
to have that lunch.
Yep.
And like right now where I am, it's almost 5 o'clock. So because of our schedule tonight, we had a quick bite before I got on the call.
Hmm.
But after we get off of this, I'm not working for the rest of the evening. Actually, my husband and I are going out for a drive. We've moved to a new area. A couple's invited us out. We're going to explore an ice cream shop. I
Great.
like ice
That's
cream.
good. That's
So
excellent.
yeah, that is so ultimately important. But I
Yep.
do want to let you loose because I know that you've come prepared to talk about the ins and outs of marketing. So I'm going to let you loose for about 5-6 minutes to talk about that, and then we'll do a little bit back and forth.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah. So, and thanks for that, Kim. And I'm going to pick up on your issue of having downtime and getting away from your work. I love what I do. I really do. I could be on my laptop on the weekends searching for new things, that like new software tools for the business, etc. And sometimes I have to force myself to turn that off. And I have to. So there are things that I do. Even if I get up at 4, I make sure that by noon I leave the external office and I go to the gym or I go for a run. And running, and I've been doing that since I was a kid, is very helpful in relieving stress for me. And so it allows me to navigate through these challenges, but also to keep a level head. I also sometimes just stop and play my guitar
Mhm.
and Playing my guitar is like listening to the radio or your favorite record to a lot of people. There are songs that I've written that I just love hearing myself play over and over again. But then I've also had to take strategic days off. Like I may take a Thursday and a Friday off, like once or twice a month. And I tell myself, get away from the office, don't do anything. Fortunately, now I've got people stepping in who can handle things when I'm not there. So that was a big part of me doing things where my company isn't driving me, I'm driving my company. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, but going back to, things that I put in the book, and the reason I wrote the book was I, for the last 25 years or so, I've talked with a number of entrepreneurs, small business owners, and they ask me my advice. It's sort of like people going to the doctor or who's a friend or the attorney who's a friend and asking them legal or medical or healthcare questions. So people ask me my advice. And so formally and informally, I work with entrepreneurs, small business owners. And one of the things that I came across over and over again, not by everyone, but entrepreneurs sometimes think if you put your shingle outside your door that says open for business, everyone's going to rush to you. And that doesn't happen that way. And so I would constantly tell people, well, nobody cares about your business. Your mom might, your wife, your husband, your kids, your college roommate may love what you're doing, but most people are indifferent. And so, because there's so much other stimuli, there's so many other things grabbing for their attention, you have to make an effort to carve out real estate in someone's mind. And so, friends have told me that it's akin to mind control, which that's funny, but that's really not. It's really doing what Coke and Apple Computer do. They constantly advertise, promote their brand, and if they were to stop, their sales would plummet 25% overnight. Because people need to be reminded. We have to remind people this is a great brand, this is a great product, this is a great service. And so that's where the book title came from. Nobody cares about your business, because I had to tell people that over and over again. And so some of the keys to, well, how do you make people love your business then? Well, there are a number of things you have to do. And I outline these things in each of these chapters in the book. One book is about brand development. You have to develop a brand, and a brand is not just a logo. A brand is your company's service or product and all the attributes associated with that company, product, or service, what people remember. So if you go to, there's a Brazilian restaurant that we love going to called Fogo de Chao, and it's been around for a while. They come and they slice the meat. And so their brand is they give you as much meat as you could possibly eat if that's your thing. And so, and they do a pretty good job of that. And they've got excellent service, et cetera. And so their brand is if you want to eat a lot of meat, but they now have other things too, and you pay a flat fee for that, then go have at it. And so that's their brand. Their brand is, all the meat you can eat, several different types of meat too, fish, chicken, pork, et cetera. And so on the downside, if you work for a company or if you're using a product or service where they have a horrible reputation, that's their brand as well. And so exactly. And so establishing and building and growing a brand is critically important. And then I move into things such as how do you build a website? There are multiple ways to build a website. There's no one right way to do it. How do you do promotion? How do you do advertising, whether it's online, whether it's traditional? How do you use radio, social media, and things of that nature? How do you do print production too? And so how do you create flyers, mugs, T-shirts, hats, and things of that nature? And so, this is sort of like a cheat sheet. Okay, so for those who don't know marketing, if you're an entrepreneur or small business owner and you're not familiar with marketing, this is a cheat sheet that shows you how to do certain things. And I'll give you one example. And I've seen this happen a lot. People create a logo for their business. They go into Microsoft Word and they're like, hey, I just created a logo. Well, when you create a logo, you have to keep in mind that if you intend to put it on a website, you also have to keep in mind that you have to put it on if you put it on a card, if you put it on a flyer, if you put it on a mug, a hat, or a T-shirt, you have to use different colors to achieve the same look across all channels and all platforms. If
Yes.
you have a PMS color that's like, I'm just making this up, $9.79, and you use that for website logo, for brochure logo, for business card logo, for hat logo, for it's all going to look different. So you have to use one color for print. You have to use another color for website. You have to use likely another color, depending on what it is, for producing things on a t-shirt, et cetera.
Mhm.
And so I explain these things for the readers of the book because no one's going to explain it to you. You have to sort of live through it. So I help readers of the book, small businesses, entrepreneurs, to sort of have that cheat sheet and say, oh, I want to do this. So this book says I should go about it this way. And so it cuts through a lot of red tape. And as I say, it cuts through a lot of BS. And being a marketer and having an agency and working with agencies, there are some that do a great job of cutting to the chase. There are some that do a great job of creating fluff and BS. So I prefer
Well,
the former.
it's even things like dots per inch. If you
Yeah.
create a logo online and you put
Yep.
it on Facebook and you put it on your social media, that's all perfectly well and good.
Yes.
Try to print that thing out
Yeah.
when it doesn't have enough dots per square inch, or you try to scale it to make it bigger to put it on something,
Right. Right.
and it looks horrible. Like, you have to, even, let's just say you don't change the colors, okay?
Yep.
But even simple things like dots per square inch, and all of those things affect how people see your brand. Because if
Absolutely.
they see this pixelated, out of scale image of your logo, it doesn't impress them.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. Even
Yeah.
if your focus is not marketing, if you present that, it makes it look like, even let's say you're a store owner, or let's say you manufacture clothes or whatever, it makes you look like you don't know what you're doing if you can't get your logo right. And so that's
Yeah.
something that entrepreneurs and solopreneurs need to keep in mind.
Now, one thing, Ernie, I was wondering about, because this is something I've seriously thought about, because one of the things I teach is authority marketing.
Mhm.
How important is it in terms of your marketing to really understand or really have a well-defined target market?
Critically important. And, and this is another thing that I run across, where entrepreneurs, small business owners want to cast a wide net. They want to market
Mm,
to everybody and their mother. And I have to explain to some folks that it's best if you narrow your focus and define a niche and target and market to them. Well, what about
yeah,
all these other people? And again, I go back to, and nobody cares. Okay. So you're going to spend $1 million trying to boil the ocean, so to speak, and you can't. You have to focus on those who are most likely going to be receptive to your product or service,
yeah,
and those who you would think at some point with a number of interactions are going to make a decision to buy from you. And that's usually a niche, a small segment of a target audience, whether it's, you know, um, Caucasian males between 35 and 55, or African American women from the ages of 18 to 35 who live in the Midwest or who live in metropolitan areas or something like that. So defining your target market. My target market for Receivable Savvy is um, finance executives, decision makers, and managers who are on the order to cash or the supplier side, because there's multiple components to finance. You could be on the buyer side where you're handling accounts payable. You could be on the supplier side where you're handling accounts receivable. My focus is on the supplier side, handling accounts receivable, and it's primarily CFOs, finance directors, et cetera. For mid-sized companies. And the reason why it's mid-sized companies and not small companies and not Fortune 500 companies is because when I focus on mid-sized companies, it also, by extension, speaks to large Fortune 500 companies because they're doing similar things. It
yes,
doesn't speak to small businesses because small businesses don't deal with the same thing that mid-sized businesses deal with in terms of order to cash, invoicing, et cetera. There's some overlap, but an example would be small business is going to use QuickBooks. Okay. A mid-sized company is going to use an ERP system like Oracle or NetSuite. Okay. And
Yeah.
so those are two different types of disciplines. And so we don't speak the
The
QuickBooks
same language.
accounting small business. Yes, exactly. And so we don't speak small business accounting language. We speak mid-size order to cash language.
Yeah, I totally get that. And you know, the thing is, here's what I've learned, especially as a solopreneur. When you
Mhm.
don't have a marketing team and you don't have a sales team and you're running all the hats,
Yeah.
if your marketing is targeted and you have that specific group, first of all, it allows you to stand out more so that people actually notice you.
Yes.
But secondly, if you do that, you don't have to talk to as many people to convert a lead. So you're actually saving yourself time and
Absolutely.
energy and a lot of no's
Yep.
by having that well-defined target market. And we're going to shift gears here because we got about maybe 5 minutes left. And there's a question that I ask every author that comes on the show. So normal listeners, you know what's coming next. And the question is this:
Mhm.
what was the good, the bad, and the ugly of publishing your book?
Oh boy, that's interesting. I think I'll start with the bad and the ugly, and I'll end with the good. The bad was really finding the time to do the editing. I wrote it a few years ago, like in one weekend. I just, diarrhea of the brain, where it's like I realized I should put this stuff down on paper because I'm talking to all these entrepreneurs. These things continue to come up over and over again. This might make a good book. And so I just, stream of consciousness over the weekend. And I thought, this is actually pretty good, but it needs to be edited. And so I did the editing myself, hired an editor to help me edit it, etc. And then other stuff got in the way of growing a business, and it sort of sat on the shelf. And so, and by the way, I was a aspiring author back in the mid 90s when I was growing my career. And that was the old fashioned way where you have to go through an agent or a publisher. So there was no Kindle publishing, okay, or Amazon
No.
publishing. And so I'm putting together physical packages to send to agents, So, but this time around, the end of last year, I said, I have to commit myself to finishing the book because I think it'll be very helpful to people. And so, beginning of this year, I spent a few months doing some additional editing, adding some new things to it because things have changed in the last few years a little bit. And went the route of having it formatted and then um, uploading to Amazon. So the bad was it sat for a few years. Okay. The ugly, um, maybe the ugly was I realized that, in order to get paid from Amazon, number one, you've got to sell a good number of books. There's a threshold. And then they don't send you the money until 60 days later, after you've reached that threshold. So it's like, okay, well, that's great. Hopefully nobody's relying on that to pay the mortgage. And so, but the good has been things like this. And so I have a chance, a new platform and a new opportunity to talk to entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, small business owners, where I didn't have as much of a wide profile and opportunity to do this. And so I think the book has helped some people that I know and some people that I don't know. And it's everywhere I turn, there's someone saying, "Hey, you wrote that book that has that funny title," and it's like that's great. So I really enjoy that. But I think the best good is that it's helping people, and that it's an opportunity to share some of the things that I've shared with people that I know, and sharing it with people that I haven't actually met or don't know.
Yeah, so true. You were saying that, and one of the things I teach my clients, this will be the last thing before we kind of sign off, but I teach my clients that writing a book is not a field of dreams. You talk
Yeah,
about putting out the sign and expecting business to come. Well, it's the same
yeah,
thing with publishing a book.
absolutely,
If you don't market that book, nothing is going to happen. You have to
absolutely,
market. It becomes a marketing tool, right?
yeah,
And so many people have that concept. Oh, I'll just write a book and all this stuff comes flooding in. No, you write the book, you go through all the good, bad, the ugly of getting that book published, and then the
yes,
real work begins.
yes. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You've got to, I try to leverage the fact that I'm now officially an author, and with clients, with prospective clients, there are other organizations that I volunteer with, and and I really enjoy it. And so because they know that I'm an author, et cetera. But you also, as you mentioned, you also have to market it. You have to market it on Amazon if you're publishing it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or anywhere else. I also use Facebook too. Facebook is a fantastic way to market books, and it's relatively inexpensive to do it.
Yeah.
So there are multiple methods that you should use to market your book, and I'm a big believer in not necessarily at the dinner table at Thanksgiving, if you're around family per se, unless it's a book that pertains to something like that. But I talk about it all the time to the point where I don't want to be an annoyance to people, but if the opportunity presents itself, I do talk about it. And people have said, you know what, I'm going to go out and buy your book. And so they do that, and then they want me to sign it. So that's a nice to have.
So, Ernie, we are out of time. So, what I would love for you to do is just, if people have enjoyed this episode and they want to connect with you, how can they get a hold of you? And do you have any freebies today that the audience can enjoy?
My goodness, freebies. Well, I tell you what. I have my company website, Receivable Savvy, is receivablesavvy.com. My email address is, you can send an email to me at info@receivablesavvy.com. You can also connect with me via LinkedIn. So I've got a lot of LinkedIn connections. And so if there are 5 people who come to me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw you on Kim's show, can I have a free copy of your book? I will give them a free copy of the book. So it
Ooh,
has to be
love
the
that.
first 5 to do it. So if the first 5 do it, starting I guess now, then you'll get a free copy of the book.
Oh, Ernie, I love that. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. So, this has been Ernie Martin and Kim Thompson-Pinder on the Author to Authority podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the very next episode. Bye now.